Have you checked the children? You're a little mad sometimes.
Hi, I'm Chucky. Wanna play?
Sometimes that is better.
You're gonna need a bigger boat.
Bienvenidos to all the 20th century ghosts of firemen cruising in Nosferatu through strange weather on their way to Key House. It is time to think outside of the heart-shaped box and raise your horns for the first installment in a while of Run to the Hill! That's right, guys. This has been a long time coming, and you see that I'm on a different set than I typically would be for, yes, Hail to Stephen King, but once a month on Tower Tuesdays, we are going to be pivoting, a little rotation action going down, everybody, and it's either going to be covering his beloved son, Joe Hill, or we may veer into some of his contemporaries or those who inspired him. I have been teasing Barker at the Moon for quite a while, and also Lovecraft You to death, so those are some things in the pipeline here since the channel relaunch here, but obviously, welcome to the horror show, and I am known on this level of the Towers, Jaime and Fuego, as you all know. But yes, everybody, so I have been wanting to return to discussing Joseph Hillstrom King for quite a while, known professionally as Joe Hill, and that's because, man, his stuff is, dare I say, and Lady Catherine agrees, that sometimes it's better than his dad's. Like, his stuff has that fervent lean and meanness that, you know, Cy King's, the really younger material, you know, was just so prevalent with. And, yeah, so I've been wanting to basically excuse me, do a kind of like countdown sort of situation and, you know, just take into my thoughts about some of the most wanted Joe Hill adaptations. And so obviously they've been trying to make The Fireman for a while, and I would love, love, love Heart-Shaped Box to actually transpire. They did a pretty damn good job, I think, with Nosferatu on AMC, even if I thought the second season was significantly superior. Lock and Key kind of defanged and declawed at this point. But still, I'm very much anticipating the second and third season because they are working on a third season, even though I don't even think they finished filming the second one, but it was already renewed by Netflix, so that was cool. Nosferatu, it ran the course of the story, and I thought expanded on the lore a little bit, bringing in some of the stuff from the Wraith comic. That was cool. But yeah, man, it's a fascinating sort of situation with Joe Hill because of the fact that I feel like he has more high-profile sort of stories that would make amazing features or would just be great, you know, entries on like Creepshow or, well, The Twilight Zone, the new one from Jordan Peele got canceled, so I guess that's no longer an anthology outlet like it used to be. But yeah, man, I was kind of disappointed in the second season of Creepshow. We're going to discuss it during our end of the month live stream here in the horror show. But yeah, I really loved the fact that in the first season we got Joe Hill story and then we got a Cy King story. And I know we had the adaptation of, you know, Twittering from the Circus of the Dead, which was that like motion comic sort of thing. And then we did get Survivor Type, you know, just to lean into his father's stuff real quick. But, you know, those were made during the pandemic, and I was a little underwhelmed by them, just like I thought Savini was going to kill it with Lake Champlain, and then not so much. So I know for it to be a Creepshow entry, it needs to have that tongue-in-cheek sort of silliness, over-the-topness to a degree. But even Cy King's Grey Matter, I didn't think was that good. But I am diverting from the point. So the fact that, you know, what, Scott Derrickson, I think is the name, it's either Derrickson, Dickerson, whatever. He's the dude who, you know, did the Ethan Hawke movie that is totally eluding my mind right now, Sinister, and the first Doctor Strange, actually. But he is working on an adaptation of The Black Phone, which, despite being from 20th Century Ghosts, it's not one of my favorites. And I know everybody points to pop art. That's, you know, one of his most iconic, obviously. But yeah, I have prepared my own list of stuff, and these are short stories and novella specifically. So yeah, obviously, as much as the aforementioned fireman and heart-shaped box need to be made, yes, I'm sticking to the smaller, just more condensed sets of work from Sci-Hill, as I will just affectionately call him as well. Joe, you're the man, sir. So let's just cruise through these 10 different bits of awesomeness that we have. Now, as y'all can see from those dope deluxe editions that I have up there, Joe Hill has 2 different sets of short stories that he has put out, being Full Throttle and 20th Century Ghosts. And then we also have a similar sort of approach to what his father did with, like, you know, different seasons and 4 Past Midnight, and most recently If It Bleeds, and yes, also Full Dark No Stars is terrific. But he did a collection called Strange Weather, which was 4 different novellas, and you will see a representation from that as well. But these are in no particular order, but let's just cruise through these and enjoy this palaver about Joe Hill. So I'm going to start with, I think it was one of his first that he ever published, and so most of the stuff from 20th Century Ghosts was in fact published in like other, you know, publications, you know, magazines and, you know, papers and whatever, various like collections that have that anthology of various authors as opposed to just Joe. And Best New Horror, dude, I think it was the first Joe Hill thing that I ever read, you know, even before getting into like the Lock and Key comics, and then in turn, you know, way later on, Basketful of Heads and Plunge and The Cape and stuff like that. But Best New Horror is incredibly intriguing because of the fact that there is I believe it's a UK collection called Best New Horror that releases, I don't know if it's multiple times a year or if it's just once, but this is about a guy who reads like a supremely twisted story and he wants to put it in the new Best New Horror anthology, but can't track the guy down. He is apparently elusive and a little aloof and a little weird, and as he goes poking around, man, I'm not sure if he would be considered a publisher or probably an editor. It's been a top minute since I've read the story, but he gets more than he bargained for by trying to actually track down this person, and they do say that to write significantly sick shit, you have to be a little messed up yourself. And without being super spoilery, this editor, if I recall correctly, finds himself in a situation that is like borderline like Texas Chainsaw Massacre sort of sick situation. And yes, I think that this could be expanded into a feature easily, or you could, you know, cram it into about 30 minutes on a Creepshow episode. This has that kind of schlocky sensibility that I think would lend itself very well to that program. So here's to hoping that at some point we do get to see an adaptation of Best New Horror, because it's very fun, even if you kind of can see where it's going. And it does end on an interesting kind of cliffhanger and could be like expanded further. You know, it is one of those like kind of not so much full-on twist endings, but it leaves room for more story to be told, despite where the short actually, you know, finds its finale. So next up, another one, and this is actually where the title of the collection was derived, because I've got this version of 20th Century Ghosts, and then I've got the previous deluxe version that I had down there, but this one's got dope illustrations and it's very cool. And I did unboxings on my my solo channel of both of these in Fuego-tainment, so if you have any inclination, please check those out, much appreciated. But 20th Century Ghost. Now, this is about as despondent in tone from the aforementioned Best New Horror that you could find. This has a dreamy romanticism to it, because there's this guy that owns this theater, and there was a woman who passed away, very tragically without getting into details, while watching The Wizard of Oz. Yeah, so we're talking, if she was seeing that in theaters upon its initial release, we're talking how far back? Way back! How far back? Way back. And her presence is still there, and he is kind of staring down his own mortality, and he's like, what is going to happen if I lose this theater, I pass away, and it gets torn down? Like, he is fearful for her immortal soul, or the apparition that remains of her, and it's a heartfelt story, and it's a very, like, just tragic and sad story, and it is definitely of those sensibilities that I prefer very much about just you know, love like beating the grave, or, you know, like just desire and affinity and all those different things, and just the power of that sort of care and affection. And yet it's a heartbreaker, man. It's a tough one, but I still, without once again spoiling, because I'm not spoiling these stories, because I would love to see how they would be imagined. This, I think, would have been much more tailored for something like Outer Limits or Twilight Zone or something like that. And that's not to say that it's like a sci-fi centric story. We will get to a few of those within this 10-story countdown. But yeah, just the fact that there is no like darkly comedic nastiness to this. It is just as I said, a haunting tale that I really, really enjoy. And so next up, we have also from 20th Century Ghosts, Last Breath. Yes, and this is one about a very strange museum that has captured the last gasping, dying breaths of all kinds of famous people, like, you know, Edgar Allan Poe and, you know, a myriad of others. And this family that goes there and, like, tours this place, and at first they think it's kind of like hammy, whatever sort of silliness, but then when you realize kind of the nefariousness of the dude who runs the place, it veers into some other slightly unexpected territory, I suppose. And so, yeah, this is most definitely one that I think could veer into the Creepshow camp, or if anybody is producing anthologies from prominent works at this particular point, I would love to see this done. There is like a darkly comedic sort of cynicism to this one, and that is the one thing that, as I've said, Joe has, that his father and you know, just as the years start to pile up, obviously, King, I think, has become more sentimental and more heartfelt compared to Joe. Joe isn't quite at that age just yet, and so yes. Now, the next selection might be kind of a cheat. I will admit that. And that's because of the fact that the Cape has, in fact, already been adapted into technically 3 different comics, although the first one was really the adaptation of the original story, and then we explore, you know, this father when he was in Nam, and then also some like mid-story sort of stuff. But essentially, for the unbeknownst, the Cape is kind of like Joe Hill doing The Boys a little bit, in the fact that, you know, the power of, you know, these sort of gifts being able to corrupt, and the nastiness of our lead character, in the fact that, so he found out when he was relatively young that if he put this old cape on, that he could fly. I think he was like 7 years old or whatever, and he was playing around with his brother when the discovery was initially made. But yeah, when he rediscovers the ability, when he's like down and out on his luck, and, you know, acting like a slovenly schmuck, and going through this breakup and whatever, and just not really exploring his full potential of, well, just life in general, being very slothfully. Yeah, he tries to win his lady friend who dumps him back by, you know, going and sweeping her off her feet. We're talking Christopher Reeves, you know, flying through the sky, status sort of stuff. And, but then with something that he does, that's where the full reveal of just the darkness within is very apparent. I think this could most definitely be adapted into, I mean, they could do it Invincible style, the Kirkman book that's been so popular, also on Amazon, just like The Boys is, or they could go live action. I think they could easily go both, and yes, I will admit once again that this is kind of a cheat because of the fact that it was adapted into a relatively solid comic. You know, I wasn't as big into the stuff with the father. I mean, it was beautifully illustrated, and I liked how the comic book expanded upon what was kind of a relatively, you know, concise short story. But this is one, I think, more so than just about anything, especially with the fervency of superhero popularity that continues to permeate, I really do think that this could be a big-time hit and could, you know, join the likes of a Lock and Key and be more successful than even a Nosferatu, for instance, that was, you know, relatively, like, moderately received. And so, yes. And now for the last one, and as I said, this is not in any particular order, obviously, but in the last one from the 20th Century Ghost collection that I would love to see adapted, this is My Father's Mask. And this is another one where it's, I saw like full series potential or feature potential for something like The Cape. Now, this is another one that I feel like would lend itself better to a shorter format. You know, My Father's Mask is essentially, it's a very, very weird story. You know, I guess somebody like Joe Hill would have to have had a odd upbringing with somebody like Stephen King as his father, and the fact that he went through those younger years in the 80s when his dad was at his craziest, I would imagine, as far as like substance intake and whatever else. But yeah, this is one about this kid who, you know, goes to this vacation property with his parents, and there's all of these different strange masks, and if I remember correctly, his father is obsessed with these playing card people who he thinks are after them or could come and get them. And you have to wear these, you know, strange masks to, you know, not let them identify you. And at one point, I think he's like running around wearing a mask naked. It's a oddball story, but this once again would be a creep show sort of entry. I think it's got that sort of dark sensibility and just oddly comedic grossness that would just be right at home on Shudder with everything that they have laid out. And there's a third season already in development, and I know they're not trying to make it like the, you know, Ramiro King show at this particular point, which is why they're bringing in like Lansdale and various other writers. And I know Nicotero has been taking a very prominent role with the storytelling on there, but My Father's Mask is friggin' weird, dude, and I think that, yes, it would be very well received if done properly in just the utter oddness of it. So that is gonna get us away from 20th Century Ghosts, and now we're gonna veer, just very briefly, into Strange Weather. That is right, guys. And Strange Weather has 4 different stories. It's got the Polaroid story, which has a lot of similarities to everything from, say, Cheese and Die to, I mean, even stuff that his father has done. But, so that is not a personal favorite. And then there was also the one that is very overhandedly social political commentary, which is something that Joe Hill has done a lot of in certain stories. Him and his father both have immense conviction in that regard, and so not here to talk about that one either. And then also you've got the 4th story, which title is eluding me, where it's like raining down these crystallized like nails almost, and they're just massacring people all throughout Boulder, Colorado, which is where the story takes place. But my personal favorite, and the one that lands here on the list as far as desired adaptations, is Aloft. Aloft is another one of these very peculiar Joe Hill stories, but it's the one that spoke to me more so than any of the others in the collection, and it's one of my favorite things that he's written because of the fact that it is just so bonkers in the fact that it incorporates everything from a guy who is timidly going on his first jump out of a plane, and he lands on a cloud, but it's like a sentient cloud almost, and it's veering back and forth between him being stuck up there and trying to figure out like how he's going to get down and what is going to transpire, but yet also flashing back to his falling in love with this girl in this band that he plays in. And so there's the musical component with, you know, being in a couple bands myself. It speaks to me in that regard, but also it's really just heartfelt and sad. And when, just like with 20th Century Ghost, when Joe veers into that sort of sentimentally territory, and I know that he's on his 2nd marriage now, and so the fairy tale doesn't always work out, so I would imagine that sense of cynicism seeps into his writing from time to time. But yeah, the flashbacks to the musical aspect, and, you know, touring and playing at these different colleges and whatnot, but it also the just wacky aspect of this cloud is like forming itself as a woman, and this dude is like screwing the cloud. It is so weird, man, but it is weird in the most original possible way, and this is one that I do think could be a full feature, although I think this wouldn't be for everybody. As much as I adore it, perhaps it would lend itself better to an anthology, but I think that this could most definitely be a full feature if, you know, lower budget, give them like $5–10 million bucks, have Blumhouse make it, and just leave it as such. So now we are jumping into Full Throttle collection. Now, there was a lot that is either being adapted already, or that you know, has already made its way to, you know, screens and, you know, a visual medium of sorts. So yes, In the Tall Grass, which was just recently released as its own individual little thing on this bookstore day that they did. I was able to obtain a copy. I'm very happy about that. That was actually Joe working with his father. And that is another thing I should mention, that reviews of every single Joe Hill book, not just of the novel and the short story collection and the novella collection variety, but Cecil Laird and myself have reviewed Basketful of Heads and Dying is Easy, and of course, you know, Lock and Key. And so yes, if you are here watching this video and you want to check out all of our proper coverage of Joe Hill, definitely you know, just yeah, search Joe Hill on the channel and you'll find all kinds of awesome stuff, comprehensive coverage. But yeah, so Throttle, which is where the Full Throttle came into play, that was adapted as a comic, and it was inspired by you know, Duel, which was you know, adapted by none other than Stevie Spielberg's and his feature debut, if I'm not mistaken. But so yes, that was adapted into a comic, and HBO Max is actually making it into it's either a feature or a series in that regard. I can't quite recall. With that story, it's not on this list, but it could go either way. I already mentioned the Black Phone, which is technically in 20th Century Ghosts, and yeah, so I mean, Full Throttle for me is a more mature and pronounced collection. I feel like Joe Hill has improved significantly as a writer. He knows his strengths, he knows just how to approach things, and just this sort of tone, but the tone is all over the place with all of these different selections. And so I know Late Returns is a personal favorite of many. Kind of this time travel, you know, traveling bookstore sort of dude. Not on the list, unfortunately. As much as I liked it, it didn't quite hit me in the feels that I think it did for some. But so Dark Carousel, separately released as a vinyl, which was interesting. So it was a vinyl audiobook, and then it also had, I believe, a cover or an original song on the other side. So on one side, you had, yes, the actual short story being read, and then you had on the other side a song that was specific kind of to the time. And this is another one of those, like, Joe Hill kind of veering into his father's territory of, like, The Body, aka Stand By Me, the feature adaptation. And so it's about these four friends, and it's basically the summer right before they're about to go off to college, and there are a few relationships that you basically know are not gonna be able to last the transition, and that is it's a fate that so many face, especially when you are veering into adulthood. But yeah, so that stuff is very, very heartfelt, as I keep going back to, but it's written very convincingly, and in just I don't know, it's very much Joe writing and recalling, you know, his own adolescence, and, you know, jumping into adulthood, and, you know, how friendships will be tested and possibly not survive the challenge. And then we get into the fact that there is a crazy carousel of horses that come to life and attack these kids. So yeah, this is one that wouldn't necessarily have to be a feature. It could be in the anthology camp. It's a little sweeter than you would probably think of for something like Creepshow, but yeah, this could very much be, like, they could even do what Freeform is doing with Joyland in this case, and you could probably make this into a limited series. There is enough expandability there, but yes, Dark Carousel is one that when Joe isn't quite being as mean-spirited, like with some of his storytelling, and he is just kind of reflecting back, I think stories like Dark Carousel are really rad status. So next up we have, I think it's the lengthiest in Full Throttle, and it's a story called Fawn, and it's about this trophy hunter who he is just looking for the thrill of the kill, but he's pretty much exhausted all of the possibilities, and he comes into contact with somebody who was like, oh, no, I can actually take you essentially into another world. Like, for all the constant readers, Cy King fans and stuff, like, imagine a thinny that is taking you into another world that is essentially like this kind of a Lord of the Rings sort of situation, or any, like, whatever your proto go-to, you know, medieval swords and sorcery sort of stuff. With a title like Fawn, you can imagine, without me spoiling things, what his desired prey, like what the game that he is trying to, you know, capture and trophyize, if that's even a word, is going to be. And it's once again, you know, Joe just tossing in his personal views and social commentary. My father is a devout, he's a devoted and a devout big game hunter, but not like big game. I mean, he's gone and, you know, hunted moose and, you know, bears and things like that, but he's never gone to like Africa on some sort of, yeah, I want to go kill a lion or something silly like that. You know, for the most part, it's javelina and elk and deer and, you know, wild turkey and things like that. And he's less about putting something really cool on his wall and more so about just using like consumption and, you know, venison and elk and, you know, wild turkey and stuff like that. Like, he always eats everything that he goes after, and, you know, he doesn't have that bloodthirsty nature that you kind of get from the lead character in Fawn. He is something else. So, man, and that's the thing where this list was so friggin' tough, because I wanted to put Mums on here, very similar to Light Returns. It just barely missed the final grade. But yeah, gotta jump to All I Care About Is You. And this is the sci-fi centric story here. And this is one that's still, for me, and I tweeted Joe Hill about this after I read this story, and then I also listened to it, and it was the same actress who played McQueen in the Nosferatu television series. She does a great job. I'm trying to remember her name. It's not going to come back to me right now, so I'm not gonna rack my brain too much further on that. Hounds of Love, another Australian film that actress was in, is fantastic. But so it was read by her. And it's obviously futuristic, you know, distant future. This character has some kind of negative memories about her father, which kind of permeate. And it's a birthday situation where she basically pays for this old school kind of cyborg robot sort of character to come back to life, and basically the title refers to him. Like, for this descript amount of time, all I care about is you. And they have some interesting conversation, but really this would lend itself awesomely to anthology because of the fact that it's got some of that just really dark mean-spirited stuff in the finale, like what our lead character, without spoiling it, decides to do in the finale of this story just really shocked me, took me aback. And hey, they could even bring that actress from, you know, from Nosferatu, and I think she would do a hell of a job. So that is down to our finale now, everybody. We have the final story from this, and I believe it was also collected in Flight or Fright, which was a cemetery dance story. So just like various others in this collection, previously published, but you are released. This story is friggin' disturbing, dude, and yes, it does take some cues from the Langoliers, his father's tale, but this is essentially, imagine if you were on a plane, you know, a big 747 or whatever the hell, and basically the nuclear apocalypse starts transpiring, and you can't land, and you are essentially just meandrously flying around in the sky, and you know you're eventually going to run out of fuel, and there is a very eclectic cast of characters on this, and so it's just such a terrifying scenario. I thought that this story was significantly better than his father's that was in Flight or Fright. Shout out to Vincent, who was also the editor for it, along with Cy King, if I believe, if I recall correctly. But yeah, this story is friggin' haunting, man, and, you know, haunting, disturbing, all of these adjectives that I've used countless times at this particular point in the video. So there you have it, guys. That is my most wanted, shorter Joe Hill stuff, and still fingers from the cross for Heart-Shaped Box and The Fireman, as I've said. But yeah, as I looked at his Wikipedia, there are apparently 2 different novels that are listed on there as TBA, to be announced, like, and he has been hinting at the fact that, so in, I think it was 19 and 20, he focused primarily on comic books, you know, the Plunge and Sea Dogs and Basket Full of Heads, Dying is Easy, those ones that I had already brought up. But yeah, now he's like in full novel mode, and he has the Orphanhenge, and like Stonehenge, Orphanhenge, I don't know, but Orphanhenge is one, and then the Crooked Alley is one that I do recall him actually mentioning. He has these newsletter blasts that he puts out through email that are really rad status and interesting way to peer into his creative process. But yeah, so there is a lot of Joe Hill awesomeness to look forward to. The Black Phone, I believe, is releasing in January of 2022, so that is, to the best of my knowledge, a aside from the second season of Lock and Key, the next adaptation of his stuff that we are going to see, aside from Throttle on HBO Max. And so, where was I wrong, guys? Do you really think I should have put Pop Art, Late Returns? I know that there are a lot of just big apologists for both of those stories. I do like them both, but they just didn't make the cut. I went with some of those weirder ones here, man. Most definitely, Last Breath and My Father's Mask are two of the more peculiar ones. And yes, The Cape, obviously, being one that is not too much of a surprise, but have you read these stories? Have you checked out Aloft and all of its awesomeness? Have you read, you know, Fawn and Dark Carousel? You Are Released. All I Care About Is You. These are some of my personal favorites. They're so rad status. So, yes, guys, that is going to do it today. Extendo grande gracias. I've been Jaime and Fuego. You can find more on all social media sectors like Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, here on YouTube, where, yes, there is some new Infuegotainment stuff coming in the next few days. I believe my review for Wrath of Man, the new Guy Ritchie, is going to be next up. But lots of older content to explore, if you so like. And obviously, a like, share, and subscribe here on The Horror Show. Is there an author besides Clive Barker, or obviously the aforementioned Cy King? Hail to Stephen King is not going anywhere, guys. We're just trying to, you know, spice it up a little bit. So besides Barker, Lovecraft, Joe Hill, who else do you think would be cool from the horror genre to explore? I know Robert McCannon, I want to say McCammon, the guy who wrote Swan Song and various other stuff. Also, the dude who wrote the Troop, Nick something, damn, Nick Cutter, I want to say. He's another name that I've heard floated around that I've been very curious to check out. So besides the big heavyweights that I have mentioned, who in a once-a-month rotating sort of situation would you like to see some coverage about? I am very much looking forward to exploring that further. And obviously, once more, grande gracias. And yeah, guys, keep on cruising and run to the hill. Make sure to stay scared and read Joseph Hillstrom King. Bam.